So yes, posthumanism and contemporary artistic practices. This is the topic of our symposium. And yesterday I was thinking how to define posthumanism, and I recalled this paradox by Saint Augustine when he said the paradox of time. He said, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to someone who asks, I do not know." So I thought, yes, when no one asks me, I know what posthumanism is, but when I have to explain it, it's much more difficult. So, as you know, posthumanism is not a single and unifying strand of thought. Rather, it is a critical framework in which different approaches might mingle and also supplement each other. So, as you all know, the so-called posthuman term not only questions human exceptionalism, but invite us to rethink our relationship also with non-human others, with the environments, and also allow us to reconsider our exteriorization in technological tools. However, posthumanist critical theory can be easily undermined by new forms of essentialism, such as, for example, transhumanism, or the theory of the Anthropocene, which brings the anthropos back, disguised under the promise of a more efficient future. However, the future is muddy, as Haraway would say, and it still needs to be cleansed from the effects of colonialism, patriarchy, extractivism, and social injustice. So, although posthumanism is more like a patchwork of insights than a unified and coherent theory, what all its insights have in common is disbelief in a universal humanity and a universal human knowledge, grounded in the appropriation, colonization, objectification of human and non-human others, and also natural environments. So posthuman critical theory reverses the perspective, and here the human subject is seen as being connected to non-human and inhuman forces and entangled in larger biological and technological systems. So we can say that in this respect, posthumanism can be seen as an inclusive way of thinking which attempts to conceptualize what we call more than human. And I think he's a good point to introduce our keynote speaker, Justyna Stępień. So please come. And Justyna, just a few words. Justyna is a professor of literature and cultural studies at Lodz University. And she is the author of many books, but one of the most important books for me is Posthuman and Nonhuman Entanglements in Contemporary Art and the Body, and here is the copy. I can leave it just to look, to peep into it. And yes, Justyna is working on many different fields and tries to conceptualize the material boundaries of entangled beings in the Anthropocene. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you, Adrone, for first of all for inviting me for this event, and really I would love to thank you for a warm welcome and and a generous, it is very generous of you to invite me. I will try to, I think, respond to what you said in your introductory speech, and I will try to say a few things of how to clean and how to wash the things which are already destroyed, maybe, or how to reanimate them a little bit. So I will try to make you think with and for more than human world, using different examples of artistic projects on which I've been working for a while. So first of all, my lecture explores how we might think and create with and for the earth in the midst of today's polycrisis. I will open with the concept of more than human, with the slashes, an inclusive approach, and I'm going to show you that it might be a suggestion of an inclusive approach that recognizes differences across multi-species relations. In this complex web of connections between self and the others, knowledge is not exclusive domains of humans. Instead, it emerges through the shared processes of thinking and knowing with more than human world and its ongoing differentiation. To ground this discussion, I will focus on two artistic projects. One of the projects is already somehow signalized in this first slide. The project entitled The Deep Listener, from 2019 by Jakob Stensten. And then I will proceed to talk about project, first of all, project by London-based duo Metallurgy, Morphologies. These works show how artists engage with the world rather than simply represent it, rather than simply reflect on it. I will draw on Karen Barat's scholarship, and I will argue that artistic practice reshapes knowledge through material and embodied engagement within a framework in which ethics, ontology, epistemology are inseparable. As the lecturer will demonstrate, such practices of care, I will call them practices of care, will go beyond what is easily represented, and they will go beyond this oculocentric or representational regime. Rather, they will actively participate in shaping the world by proposing new ways of working, developing innovative methods, and articulating ethical perspectives that influence how we relate to, and I think also take responsibility in Donna Haraway's terms for the more than human world. But before I proceed to discuss the projects, I need to confront the gravity, I think, of our current reality. Sorry to say so, but I need to say a few things just to have this springboard. The conceptualization of the Anthropocene, a new geological epoch, which is not new because it's more than 20 years already with us, primarily designates a critical ecological threshold. And it has strengthened a profound assertion: we are humans, geological force, and we are the first generation to possess the precise knowledge of how our activities influence the Earth system. Consequently, we are the first generation burdened with both the power and, I would say, explicit responsibility to transform our relationship with the planet. This narrative has infused our discourse with a sense of urgency, calling for collective actions to prevent further deterioration of life. It makes us also acutely aware that the planet's uncertain future is now in our shared destiny. However, as you already said, Adrone, at the very beginning, a significant paradox emerges here. While the merger of biological and technological processes has blurred the boundaries between the natural and artificial, these intercorporeal compositions remain tethered to the system of social control, as Donna Haraway would say, and Rossi Braidotti. The advanced capitalist imperatives of the biotech world, for instance, frequently reproduce normative practices of representation, sustaining all dualism under the strategic guise of just to, again, use Braidotti's words, marketing of pluralistic differences. What we see is an apparent equality, engineered primarily for consumerism, I would say. It stems from a global economy that no longer functions through simple binary oppositions, but through fragmented, all-pervasive, and profit-oriented power relations. By exploiting the generative powers of plants, animals, genes, cells, the system fundamentally retools the very conditions of life on Earth. And as we witness during the COVID pandemic, for instance, or recent military conflicts, the intensification of this high-tech and military economy often aggravates existing inequalities in the name of progress, rather than resolving the crisis of the Anthropocene of which we are aware. Situated between the French Industrial Revolution and the Sixth Extinction, the traditional anthropocentric model of knowledge, grounded primarily in the representational research, of course, proves inadequate for navigating the challenges of biotechnologically induced reality. Rather than offering alternative tools, it perpetuates a logic of superiority that grants the right, and I think indeed the duty of dominion in the man's dominion over Earth paradigm of human-nature relations to this dominion over the concept of the other. However, I don't wish to use it any longer from now on. As a result, the exploitation of the non-human is not displaced, but reinforced through mechanisms that regulate and standardize institutional knowledge. In this context, for instance, Rosi Braidotti and Matthew Fuller argue in the 2019 report entitled Posthumanities in an Era of Unexpected Consequences that, quoted, growing computational systems, security terrors, new biomedical forms, and drastic ecological damage, amongst other factors, impel us to recognize the wider forms and constituents of the condition that is no longer nameable simply as humanity, the end of quote. The task, then, is not to eliminate the human, but to reconsider the human position so as to recognize the material continuum of nature culture, in Donna Haraway's terms. By acknowledging our relationality with the non-human world, we may begin to restore ethical balance and deepen our understanding of the ongoing processes that shape reality. The question that arises now is how to think with and for, not about human and non-human entities in the face of the ecological crisis and its emerging anomalies, biotechnological advancement and its revolutionary solution that still endures human exceptionalism and the imminent threats and limitations brought, for instance, by the current military conflicts, without falling into the traps of this dualistic paradigm, which generates more oculocentric perspective on everything. To address this, I use the term used earlier by David Abrams in 1996, and his notion of more than human, which was introduced in The Spell of the Senses, Perception and Language in More Than Human World, and further developed by Sarah Watmore in her cultural geography research. However, what I propose to do is a deliberate orthographic shift, inspired by Karen Barat's diffracted methodology, which is not about reflection, which is not about representation, but seeing everything as a process. I use slashes rather than dashes. The slash emphasizes that human and non-humans are not separate entities that are subsequently connected, but participants in an interconnected process in which actions, materials, and meanings are always already entangled. In Barat's terms, the slash marks a mode of thinking grounded in diffraction, for grounding complexity and relationality over linear cause and effect reasoning. And as I elaborate in my book, Posthuman and Nonhuman Entanglements in Contemporary Art and the Body, I'd want to show you the cover, and also I've been using the image of the cover because I think it aptly emphasizes the co-constitution of differences and different organisms rather than their colonialization. From this perspective, nature, culture are not separate domain but intertwined processes. This view also aligns with Barrett's ethico-onto-epistemological perspective, which recognizes that all agents, human and non-human alike, are active participants in meaning-making. Within this framework, non-humans reclaim their agency as equal co-producers of meaning. Knowledge, therefore, emerges as a collaborative act of thinking with and for the world. The concept of more than human entanglement allows me to bypass the hierarchies and inequalities traditionally upheld by socio-cultural norms. By focusing on these entanglements, I analyze how artists reenact and destabilize anthropocentric position, a position historically responsible for ignoring the agency of non-human entities. And my lecture examines here how these artists reconfigure traditional modes of expression. The projects you will see are rooted in research creation, a format that fosters collaboration and co-exploration among artists, species, scholars, and the public. These are not static works. They are experiments in material interconnectedness that utilize very often movement, gesture, human and non-human assemblages to probe the entanglements of our present, our histories, and also our potential futures. In these practices, artists move beyond representational logic, and instead of merely reporting or reflecting, depicting the world, they very often use methods that prioritize relations, actions, and events. I propose again another orthographic shift, more than representational inquiry, drawing upon Hayden-Lorimer's notion of more than representation with the slashes. I found that this prefix, more than with the hyphen, resonates more effectively, for instance, at non-representational, and some of you may already encountered these non-representational techniques. As it suggests, with the hyphen, an openness to difference rather than a simple renegation and closure. Much like more than human framework, more than representational methods with the hyphens indicate that while artistic practices are deeply engaged with the harsh realities of biotechnological and ecological processes, they simultaneously offer the ethical potential for situated action. They don't merely describe the world, they actively participate in its making. Ultimately, this suggests that acting ethically is not a solitary human pursuit. It is the act of entering into relations with many others, cultivating a shared and collective understanding of our interconnected existence. So let us move to the projects and let us leave theory for a while. These theoretical concerns which I presented, I think find profound material expressions in the work of Materialurgy, the London-based duo of Helena Hunter and Mark Peter Wright. Their practice investigates the critical ecologies of environmental change across various disciplines, merging quite often artistic creation with co-constructed events and also live performances. By addressing air pollution, waste, flooding, and climate modeling, they bring art and science into sustained dialogue, placing collaboration at the very center of their methodology. Their work does not exist in a vacuum, I would say. It is born from fieldwork in different hydropower stations, disused steelworks, ice simulation labs, and also abandoned mines. So the fieldwork is the first stage, usually, when they start working on their projects of all sorts. A primary example of their approach is the 2019 project Air Morphologies, developed in collaboration with scientists and virtual reality developers. Yes, I'm going to talk about technology today. This project explores how art and aesthetics can engage with the toxic, invisible materials that permeate our daily existence. In Air Morphologies, users are placed directly within a virtual environment of airborne particles. And I'm pretty sure that now you will be surprised because the majority of you will think about the skeptical attitudes toward VR and the amount of carbon footprint it uses. Let's leave it for a while, okay? This is not a merely visual spectacle, as the one that we expect, the one that we usually see in the Oculus, Googles. It is meditation. Immersive experience where participants encounter morphologies of toxic particles in polluted air. The project fosters a startling sense of intimacy with the matter that is usually invisible to the naked eye, of course, and yet omnipresent, circulating within and around us, helping to constitute our very biological lives. While this proximity is technologically mediated, it transcends the typical affective environment of mainstream gaming. So what they do just to transcend this VR technology, they enable users to investigate lives of particles in both material and critical terms. Crucially, the work also foregrounds this techno-reductive dimension of the encounter, reminding that our vision of nature is always filtered through the tools we use to see it. In this way, Air Morphologies aligns with Bernard Stiegler's notion of negentropy, to contrast the concept of entropy. For a philosopher, negentropy is based on the conviction that thinking means caring and becomes a therapeutic reversal of the toxicity of current digital technologies, which are to devise ways for economic system to operate, again, in harmony with nature, not against it. And I would say that Air Morphologies, and I'm going to show you in a second, functions as a negentropic practice of care that reconfigures our relationship with a more than human world, of which technologies themselves are a part. By locating viewers within this VR environment, the project becomes a techno-ethical practice. It cultivates new ways of thinking and caring for more than human world that it has been fundamentally transformed and often dominated, the world that has been transformed and dominated by the anthropogenic forces. Let me move on. Developed during their Delphina residency in London, the project was organized as a three-stage installation, a visual phase, short films, an immersive participatory experience, that is VR stage, and a subsequent series of workshops based on collaborative writing with toxic materiality. So I think this duo is quite known for the amount of workshops they usually run for the participants of each and every show they organize. This structure was designed to invite participants into a meaningful dialogue, a leap into unknown horizons, where they might confront their own standpoints and accelerate new ways of being with and for the world. The series of short films in the first stage, entitled Breathe, Touch and Sense, prepares the viewer for an encounter with toxic fly ash. By introducing a meditative pace, the artists create the psychological and somatic conditions necessary for the subsequent stages. The instructional subtitles guide the viewer. Focus on the air particle, breathe in deeply, breathe out, be with the particle, imagine its touch, hear its sound. What world does this particle create? This instructional language guides us in how to be, think, and become, and breathe with this toxicity, while science and industry typically categorize fly ash, the invisible element, or through abstract data. Metallurgy unfolds its material details, allowing for a tangible, sensual encounter with the unknown. This prepares participants for the subsequent virtual experience, a transition from observing the micro world to being, and I would say becoming with it. The artistic duo employ VR technology to minimize also the photographic and here representational effect of the material structure of toxic particles and breach technological and artistic methods. In the VR phase, the artists consciously avoid also, and I need to emphasize that these gamification techniques often prioritize control and predictable user responses. Instead, they construct a one-to-one experience of this more than human interconnectedness. With the aid of the VR headset, users watch their constantly changing perspective of three-dimensional fly ash images on a large scale, immersive projection that unfolds the multiverse. And this is what you can see inside. And you can move a while moving the headset. With the aid of the headset, the effect stems from the application of VR headset in the project, which must be used by active observer so that the simulation's communication structures can meet human senses. To make this three-dimensional matter truly tangible, very often, in the majority of the shows, users hold a gray touch ball, a physical object embedded with a sensor that resembles a fly ash particle. As the participant moves the object, the particle in the virtual field moves and speaks, directly addressing the user. This embodied practice is enriched by haunting sonic sounds, which are archival recordings of damaged lungs, which fill the sonic void. This creates an unearthly atmosphere, pushing the user beyond mere immersion into a state of flesh space, I would say, reflection. And we are forced to ask ourselves, to what extent are we, I would say, ourselves particles? How are we entangled in this cosmic circulation? And how can we take responsibility for the toxicity we compose? While crossing the frontiers of our experience, metallurgy's artwork, embedded within the era of technoscience, corresponds, to borrow from Maria Puig de Bellacasa, that the world and time in which scientific knowledge and the material production of the technologies are inseparable from socio-political processes and imaginaries, including those of commodification. Technoscience as the world where knowledge is inseparable from materials worlds, here knowledge is involved in making things matter, is here conceived as literary as possible, material semiotic agency in the mattering of the world. In other words, the artists open up transdisciplinary perspective to examine material and discursive connections between different phenomena by showing how they are mutually and intimately imbricated. This directly affects the fact that the project reintegrates technology, reconnecting nature with techniques, allowing one to notice the entangled complexities of the world processes and thus critically also evaluate one's dependence on the technosphere. While rediscovering the intimate recognition of our position with the techno-scientific world of the Anthropocene, the project highlights that technology is no longer merely, to quote Yu Hui, merely prosthetic, meaning as mere artificial replacement or supplement. Instead, the order of things seems to have reversed. Technology is not only supplementary, but rather it becomes itself the ground. The end of quote. In doing so, the artists situate us in the world, reconfigure the automatizing capacities of technology, reconceptualize the relation between nature and culture to address the need for a new mode of environmental knowledge production, based not on exclusion, but on the inclusion of different more than human agencies and their materialities. The immersive, affective, sensational world constructed by materiology brings us closer to the essence of more than human world, of which we are an integral part, and thereby, I think, inspires us to become, in the idiom of Bernard Stiegler, again quoted, obliged to think and care otherwise, the end of quote. In such conditions, participants can learn how to heal the wounds inflicted by the Anthropocene, the results of the numerous anthropogenic activities, and thus cherish ecological awareness from the technological determinism and its abstract way of recognizing organic life. In other words, I need to borrow from Daniel Stern, the project accentuates that we and technology, written together, intervene in an emergent flash space, and we and it, together, we move, think, and feel to transform the current toxic milieu. Our morphologies, at the end of quote, becomes thus a more than human project that explores domains of care which do not derive only from our obligations, but from our involvement in maintaining and repairing the conditions. And by unfolding now novel forms of knowing, I would say that this, coming back to that slide, this transdisciplinary project seeks to reconfigure inherent unsustainability of the Anthropocene. Artists prepared workshops for error morphologies, which were held at different galleries, and they were central to this reconfiguration. The artists developed a strategy to crowdsource and co-construct narratives about particulate matter from diverse perspectives. The objective was to provoke participants to think and write with the invisible, articulating stories born from their time spent being and breathing with a toxic environment, a VR environment. A key component of this was a fly ash journalism, a work group exercise where participants researched the impact of fly ash on human health, land, water, and air. Crucially, they were also tasked with investigating current activist interventions and anti-pollution campaigns. In this respect, the workshop became a kind of a vital link between embodied and social experience. By communicating the crisis creatively and imaginatively, the project deepened the participants' critical insights into the environmental devastation. And I would again draw on Bernard Stiegler and his concept of neganthropocene, which represents the challenge of finding, as he said, a performative response adequate to the systemic challenges of our time. We can deduce that metallurgy's multi-level project triggers exactly these neganthropic processes of change. Through the act of sharing and exchange, participants are invited to reflect on their position within techno-scientific world, speculate on plausible improvements for a collective future, and unlearn, I do hope, to some extent, the anthropocentric habits that have been detrimental to our shared habitat. Ultimately, our morphologies proves that more than human knowledge is not a static observation, but an active relational practice of care. And let me move on to the second project, which I mentioned. The transition from the invisible toxicity of the air to the complex resonance of the entire ecosystem is captured in the work of Jacob Kook-Stensen, a Danish artist who is known for his environmental digital storytelling. In his 2019 project, The Deep Listener, Kook-Stensen utilizes spatial, audio, and augmented reality to invite public into an immersive exploration of the species inhabiting London's Kensington Gardens and Hyde Park. The Deep Listener is a joint practice, again, base research, that encompassed field work, field observation, digitalization, also like cooperation with numerous biologists and scientists, and then the research in historical archives. It embraces relations to deep time, material and political territories, and most significantly to our more than human entanglements. In this regard, urban wildness is revealed not merely as a technological transformed site, but as a vibrant network of more than human materiality and sensory experiences that constitute a unique spatio-temporal dimension. Having scrutinized the existing landscape of Hyde Park, could Stępień enrich them with digital presence of local species, which were rendered in Unreal Engine, again, technology, a software typical use for video game development. Again, footprint, carbon footprint, I know. By repurposing this high-tech tool, the artist invites users to see and hear 5 specific London species. The London plane, bats, parakeets, azure blue damselflies, and reed beads. When the app opens, an introductory note reveals that the work is both a site-specific public artwork and a digital archive of the species living in the park. Actually, you can check it out. The Deep Listener is available online. You can download it and you can play with it. Of course, outside of London's parks, it doesn't make sense, right? But at least you will have like you get an impression of what I want to say. So, contrary to users' initial expectations of a passive archive, because I think it's when I heard about the project and I said, oh no, again, AR game, a public game. I think the project takes us on a journey to delve into the life in the park we do not see and the sounds we do not hear. By positioning himself as a guide, the artist, but also the positioning himself and also multi-species that he gathered are also becoming guides there. The artist amplifies practices cognitive and affective impact, allowing participants to explore an ecosystem previously ignored as intangible again or invisible. The experience of this more than human encounter, mediated via technology, forces a moment of pause, and I think it prompts us to think, why are we here with them? What biological rules do their lives follow? And how do they really sound? And are we part of the sounds that we are listening to? The Deep Listener has the potential to transform how we imagine nature and to challenge the anthropocentrism inherent in contemporary representational technologies. Utilizing an AR application, the project features an interactive map that enables users to navigate 5 specific audiovisual experiences across Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens. What must be highlighted is that each species is only accessible, that is, heard and seen, in its designated biological locations. As users move, the soundscape and its tempo shift in response to their physical proximity to the chosen species. In this framework, as the project instructions suggest, human body becomes the mechanism to alter the digital environment. Technology, in turn, acts as a bridge for active communication between human and non-human actors. By immersing participants in the park's multi-natural dimension, the application serves as a mediator where human and non-human entities become rhetorical actors, circulating within an augmented field. In Deep Listener, the traditional subject, that means human, and object, non-human relations are fundamentally reversed. The project affords the non-human agency to co-constitute the experience. Wildlife is no longer reduced to a consumable spectacle of science, a mode typical of nature tourism, but it's, I would say, elevated to the status of a guide. The application decenters human superiority, allowing users to acknowledge the agency of flora and fauna. By allowing the rhythm and directions indicated by the digital mapping, users allow non-humans to lead them through a hybrid environment, both physical and digital. In doing so, we gain knowledge not about the park, but from the park as a realm of multi-species entanglements. This shift from distance-centered observation to nature-culture continuum connections is grounded in the park's multi-natural richness. Stępien's practice not only reactivates our interactivity with the space, but also triggers a perceptual change. And this is like just an image which grasps the movement of you and the park while moving with your phone, right? So this is what you can see. You are getting into some sort of like a portal where nature is confronted with the digital nature itself. This approach transforms reactive conservation, I would say, which often enforces the traditional conservation projects, which often enforce the separation of nature from urban surroundings, into a model of environmental companionship. Unlike traditional thematic parks that enclose nature to meet market demands, the deep listener reveals that wildlife lives among us. It substitutes also a romanticized vision of nature for a practical cultivation of this multi-species, more than human citizenship. This aligns with Jamie Lorimer's idea of how to reevaluate wildlife and how to rewild nature in urban surroundings as a process that should catalyze new forms of environmental responsibility. The deep listening effect, I think it's which evokes the concept of Pauline Oliveros of deep listening, a kind of a meditation of the sounds, I think is present here also in this very project. And because it serves as the catalyst for this transformative and self-reflexivity and meditation on the wildlife that you listen to and you become with. The sonic layer is the direct result of a high-level collaboration among the artists. Field recorders, Matt McCurkle, the Museum of Natural History in London, and the curatorial team at the Serpentine Galleries. As the curator suggests, the implementation of sound in this work is not mere background noise. It is quoted, a slow, embodied process of attentive and embedded listening, the end of quote, designed specifically for learning and for being and becoming with the urban wildlife. To instill genuine educational and ontological value, Kurt's Stenson process was grounded in fieldwork. He spent months deeply immersed in Kensington Gardens and Hyde Park, not merely as a spectator, but as an observer documenting the subtle shifts in the environment, documenting, recording, but also like feeling and touching, all right, when he could. This was followed by intensive collaboration with biologists and naturalists to ensure that digital renderings were grounded in biological reality. By embracing these diverse scientific and sensory perspectives, Kurt Stenson integrates the user into more than a human world, effectively expanding the boundaries of our sociocultural imagination. In the context of the post-natural Anthropocene, what emerges is a bridge between ecology and technology that does not seek to dominate nature, but to listen to its vibrant matter. And actually, this is what happens when you have like headphones. You will see that the matter is working all the time, right? Ultimately, the deep listener proves that our technological tools, if wielded with an ethics of care, can help us inhabit the slash of the concept that I propose of the more than human, transforming us from passive consumers of landscape into active relational participants in a living and breathing world. In the deep listener, Stenson enriches the audio experience also with short textual displays that appear on screen before each encounter. So whenever you approach any species, you will get some sort of like an info. While language plays a primary role here, the project's multisensorial elements are strengthened as users become acquainted with the histories and ecological significance of each species. Each organism is granted a voice, human voice, that recounts intricate stories of interconnectedness with the cityscape. Thus, for instance, the London's plane trees will say, "As London plane trees, we are made, a modern hybrid species, a biological infrastructure, archiving pollutants. Your breathing is connected to us. We are the lungs of London." These trees uphold a non-anthropocentric agential position. They embody the interactions, I would say here, that allows us to breathe, feel, and establish connections with the organisms in the metropolitan area. The hybrid composition founded on the exchange of materials and energies accelerates urbanized rewilding processes, forcing us to confront the not determined materiality of all beings. Though Stępień applies a strategy of anthropomorphism, giving the trees a voice, of course, the easiest thing to do, right? It's not a simplistic, I would say, romanticization here. While anthropomorphism can sometimes provoke critical skepticism, here I think it serves as a technique to kindle interest in how material and ecological properties share more than human relations, and materiality, of course. The project does not present a purified vision of wildlife that has acquired human skills. Rather, it reveals a continuum of more than human entanglements between trees, the park's infrastructure, and humans. By unfolding our shared histories of companionship, as we can see, the deep listener enables users to recognize their decentered position in the co-construction of the park's environment. In this context, I would say anthropomorphism is a kind of a valuable tool for building this ecological also sensibility necessary for our survival. Drawing on Karen Barat's posthumanist account of performativity, the application positions its users as an integral to nature's ongoing processes of becoming bioarchitecture. The project's discursive elements, its stories and labels, are inseparable from the material processes of the physical and digital environment. From this perspective, meaning arises not from human actively alone, but from specific material reconfigurations of the world, to quote Barat. Framing AR technology and environmental research as material discursive practices, the project foregrounds the entanglement of living and non-living entities within their historical context. In this way, London's plains trees shift from silent scenery to living conduits of shared earth through history. The deep listener emerges, I would say, as a kind of a living archive, a spatial corporeal platform for generating multinatural knowledge, and as a practice for sensing the complexities of an urban ecosystem, where humans are no longer the sole authors of meaning, but participants in a vast, sentient relationality. In conclusion, Yu Hui asserts in his 2017 text on cosmotechnics for a renewed relation between technology and nature in the Anthropocene that perplexing conditions of our times require the renewal of relations between nature and technology. As the philosopher emphasizes, there is a need to reconceptualize and reconcile the connection so as not to fall into the traps of culturally ingrained mediations of ecology that enforce universal patterns of knowledge production, neglecting the indigenous cultures, for instance, that very often see non-humans as an equal co-producers of social cultural meaning. By introducing the term cosmotechnics, Hui attempts to overcome dualism between nature and technology, humans and non-humans, that is, animals, plants, machines, and modern and non-modern, to go beyond the mere discourse of political economy. Instead, he reaffirms the relation between cosmology, morality, and technology, which is erased by technological system of the Anthropocene. Hui proposes a model based on collaboration and non-anthropocentric inclusivity of non-modern cultures and their cosmologies to develop new epochal sensibilities that could reappropriate modern technologies. Following, of course, Stigler, to some extent, he no longer perceives technology as a prosthetic and supplementary tool for exploiting the non-human, but as a means to renew and recreate environment and technological milieu. In this proposal, the question of coexistence with nature becomes seminal. Hui's proposal also aligns with Rossi Braidotti's principle of posthuman knowledge and her concept of posthuman convergence, woven into the network of Zoe geotechno assemblages, which emphasize that life, quoted, is a complex system of non-human elements, as in animal and vegetable, that is Zoe, earth and planetary relation, that is Geo, while it is also technologically mediated, that is Techno. Materially interconnected, embodied and embedded, the assemblages reintegrate previously segregated species, categories and domains. For the philosopher, this is Zoe geo-techno-oriented framework with its material, biological and technological, discursive and more than human entanglements that can mobilize post-anthropocentric relations based on multiple perspectives that inhabit them. The artistic practice, practices I have discussed today demonstrate how creative practice can intervene in this environmental debate. The artists reflecting on how art, these projects decenter the human in order to highlight more than human world, where species relate through cooperation, co-creation and mutual adaptation rather than competition. Ultimately, these projects remind us that care, I think, is sustained through material practice, the concrete forms of labor, maintenance, and also care receiving that keep our world alive. And if we were to inhabit the Anthropocene with any sense of integrity, we must learn, I think, to see our technological system not as weapons against nature, or maybe construct technology which is not a weapon against nature, but also as a participant in a shared, more than human future that we are going to have. Thank you. What I'm really interested in, these are the projects which somehow reconfigure this dualism, which think in terms of these connections, that technology is a part of environment, right? Because thanks to technology, thanks to environment, we have different technologies, right? We overuse different resources to build technologies very often too. So it's a kind of some sort of circulation, a kind of a continuum, right? Which says, okay, we cannot, they are both, right? Of how we see and co-construct our reality, right? So the projects I've been analyzing here or in a book are about maybe not the concept of nature, but environment in a sense, more than human environment. I don't know whether I responded to your question in the right way, but I think so, that you cannot get rid of technologies right now, right? Because everything is technologized, and the thing is just how to think of new technological forms that can heal somehow, that cannot be so destructive also to Earth and to us. And this is also, for instance, for what Yuk Hui proposes. And I think Stigler was thinking about that in his collective for a while, doing research with artists, right? Of thinking of how to think creatively with technology, but not to disturb what is already lost and what is disturbed. So I really wanted just to give some food for thought, provoking, bringing those projects which are VR and AR projects, and to provoke you to think about differently about technology, right? As a kind of a tool which can be reorganized also.
Yeah, so I think it's fascinating, the idea that technologies are becoming organic in a sense. And in these two examples, we can see that it is technologies which give us this environmental awareness in a paradoxical way. And we have now like something like a third nature. If we think that, you know, the first nature is natural, then we have cultural nature, and here we have like technological nature. So I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I cannot agree more, because technologies can also like develop our sensitivity and sensibility of how to be and become with environment outside. And I also picked projects which have this, I don't want to say educational value, because this word education is always a kind of again a hierarchy. But this a space for you to reconsider, make you think, build your awareness, as you said, and reflect on what you've been doing while being in the environment, also with technologies, with your smartphones, for instance, right? So the third, I think we've been living in the era of the concept of the third nature, whether we wish it or not. And the thing is, how to use technology properly, or how to think with technology properly, not to overuse it against environment and against our planet. Which is, again, I would say maybe an utopian idea, right? Taking into account that these projects are really like minor, right? Because they were often not well funded, and artists need some special equipment, technological equipment to develop their practices, and there are not so many sources to that. But there are a lot of projects appearing also in art academies, I would say, with students like that. This is what I've noticed, for instance, in Warsaw, in Poland. I don't teach there, but I know that students are working on such projects which combine technological reflection on environment. Yeah, sure. It's all about awareness, but also like about awareness and the critical standpoint one has to have towards technologies we have been using, right? Yeah. They are our part, frames, glasses. I wouldn't be able to see you. You wouldn't hear me without mic. Probably I will have to shout. Or these are like the basic things, right? But sometimes we use them without, as you said, being aware that there is the other side of also the technologies which help us understand our reality. And they have been with us since, as you said, the ancient times in different forms, because the technology has been always with us, and I think allows us to think and also co-construct our reality, starting with a knife, or like that's with a simple tool, for instance. Yeah. Okay. I think I use the word relations, not relationship, and interconnectedness. In relation, like to talk about the entanglements. Entanglement, we are entangled. Our materialities, our energies are entangled. This is quantum physics term, right? Whether we wish it or not, we cannot see that, but we are entangled here, being in this room together. We constitute one sort of like energy which exchanges, and this is a kind of an entanglement of the materiality and the energies which I would say exchange, right? And we are modified here, all of us. I'm modified by you. You are modified by the person who sits next to you, materially, and also like this in the non-material sphere. And this is like the quantum physics understanding of the word of entanglement. And thanks to these entanglements, we build relations, and the system of our interconnectedness, right, with the outside world, with others. So it's something. Relationship is something different, because I think in a sense relationship are chosen, I would say, very often, and relations are but part of our existence here. I don't know. Maybe I'm not right. It's semantics. Yes. Interdependence. Yeah. Yes. But at least we influence it. Yeah, definitely. And therefore, this concept more than human with the dashes. It's taken from philosophy, and then from cultural geographers. At the beginning of the 21st century, they were environmental researchers said, okay, we need to define our relations to the environment, which will decenter our superiority towards nature. So we have this more than human, because once we are inside, right, we are always dependent, right, on what is going on. Wherever we are always relating to something, right? And this is like a part of our entanglement, that it's the energy which is in between us. Right. Yeah, I think slashes are more inclusive. It's in this very concept used by cultural geographers or Abram. Okay, they say, okay, we are equal, right? There are different species and we are equal, and we understand. But in a sense, they also reproduce this representational part, saying, okay, me and nature, right? And with the hyphen, I would say that it's more the focus is more on a relation than and relations between differences and appreciation of the differences here, like getting rid of these differences. That was the aim, just to get rid of the concept of the other. While still cultural geographers, whenever you will read, for instance, Sarah Watmore, you will notice that there is this distinction. So I just really wanted to use this diffraction as a kind of a process where, in which we become with the environment and with other species. And we also transform together with them, materially, and also socially, culturally, etc., etc. Yes, because interaction, it's again equality, and interaction, the basic word, it's always from the position of a superior. You interact, that means that one person interacts with another, right? So this is me and the other in the word of interaction. But interaction, this is processual, right? So we feel, we move, we breathe together in the process, and which is like a collaborative process, not a position which determines who is higher, for instance. I think this is also what Barat, how she defines interaction versus interaction, in a sense. Using again the word of the entanglement from quantum physics, that of course we interact here, being here.